This is it. This is the big one. This is the game that most anyone who plays any kind of Metroid game would say is the best. Best gameplay, the best music, the best enemies, the best practically everything. The fact that this game was released on the SNES back in 1994? Forget it. This game has the honor of being the biggest game of its kind during its time. A whopping 24 megabytes. You heard me right. 24 megabytes. But don't take my word for it. Check out this commercial real quick. See what you think about it.
Before Nintendo came out with Super Metroid, we wanted to make sure it was the most intense Metroid battle ever. So we thought we'd see how Killer here would fare against it. Ready, boys? That's 24 megs worth of weapons, worlds, and weirdos old Killer's up against. Nintendo's biggest game ever. He's a big boy. He can handle it. Well, let's see how he did. Ship it! Super Metroid, only on the Super NES.
This game was so epic, it changed that dog's breed. This is what set the bar for any and all games that followed this specific kind of formula from here on out. But what can I say about this game that hasn't already been said by somebody else? Well, honestly, the long and short of it is, this game is great. It's really good. I would say it's damn near perfect. But therein lies the problem. It's only damn near perfect. I might catch a bit of flack for this, but hear me out. Let's dig into this work of art, see what really makes it tick, yeah? How's it going, everybody? My name is Leon. Welcome back to the Metroid Retrospective. Alright, so look, at this point you know the drill by now. Developed by R&D1 at Nintendo's offices in Japan with the help of Intelligent Systems, headed by Gunpei Yokoi... Oh, no, wait. Oh, that's not quite right, hang on. The director was Yoshio Sakamoto. They changed it up a bit. I mean, Yokoi was still involved, just as a figurehead and managed the project. But for the most part, he was only lightly involved. Sakamoto, more or less, was the one that was running the show. And what would be just about the quickest turnaround for a Metroid game, period, Super was released hot on the heels of Metroid 2. 3 years, really, worth of development. Sakamoto was quoted as saying, "We wanted to wait until a true action game was needed, and also to set the stage for the reappearance of Samus Aran." Man, they were not kidding around with this one. Stage was set. Console wars were going hard. Sega was hitting back with the Genesis with things like, Genesis does what Nintendo don't. That was legendary. But man, when Super dropped, it hit with such a force that it defined an entire genre. It cannot be understated the impact that this one single game had. I know I brought it up in one of the earlier videos, the first one, actually, of this retrospective, talking about how Metroid on the NES laid the groundwork, right? The foundation. Super Metroid, though. Oh, Super Metroid became the monolith that all other games in this genre stand in the shadow of. The work that went into this game from these developers is truly the stuff of legends. With only about a 2.5-ish year-long development cycle? I know I said 3 years, but that was the whole project. They still had to pitch that thing, right? And they only had 2-ish years to get it done. Samus would cement her place here and now as a household name in the gaming sphere, and with the numerous sequels are proof of that. All 2 of them. So... What happened then? Development was so smooth, and the game itself set a standard for all other games in the genre. Why? Oh, why did the game series basically fall off? Well, a few reasons, really. The game didn't hit the same sales as its contemporaries. It wasn't even close to Mario or Zelda in terms of sales and, well, general acceptance. Case in point, there's a time in the mid-90s where Mario was more recognizable than even Mickey Mouse. So, I mean, honestly, Samus didn't really stand much of a chance. If Super Metroid, right, is the monolith that all other games in that particular genre stand in the shadow of, Mario and Zelda are like an eclipse that all other Nintendo properties can't help but be mesmerized by. It's impossible to escape. Add on top of that what happened with Gunpei Yokoi. He headed a failed project in the mid-90s. You may have heard of it. It was called the Virtual Boy. And because of that, he kind of had to leave the company shortly thereafter. He was the one that developed Metroid from the start. So without the main figurehead for the series, they kind of just put Samus and Metroid on the shelf and just left it alone for nearly a decade. But that was the future of the series. We're not talking about that right now. Let's talk about Super Metroid, right? Let's take a look at the legend that is, and what it brings to the table in terms of narrative. Much like the first 2 games, the story is presented in, well, the manual, and is lightly sprinkled in the game here and there. Honestly, if you've ever played like a Dark Souls type game, a Soulsborne-like, then you know what the deal is here. The story is told through environmental and visual cues. The game takes place right after Metroid 2, where Samus brings the baby Metroid to the nearest Federation space station for observation and study, and safekeeping. Once Samus was sure that everything was good to go, she took her leave off to the next bounty for maybe about 5 minutes. Just as she was leaving the station, she gets a distress signal and goes right back. After docking and boarding the station, she travels back to where the Metroid study was, and finds everyone dead on the floor. This screen is so iconic for a few reasons, right? Number one, it's the title screen. Like, just full stop, it's the title screen. That's what the game starts on, is this scene. And number two, there are actually just corpses on the ground in a Nintendo game. Like, this was practically unheard of around this time for Nintendo, so the fact that this is here is wild. Immediately, this sets the tone, like, hard, right off the bat. Tells you that you're in for a bit of a rough time. You go through the corridors, you enter a room, you see a baby in its tube on the ground. Get close to it. Eyes flash. Turns out it's Ridley. I know, he had a bit of a glow up, like in all the wrong ways, but it's Ridley. And you get more tone, more theme. You fight Ridley right there, and if you do enough damage, or, if you get smacked around a little bit too much, he flies away with the baby in tow. You chase him back to where it all started, Zebes. After landing on the surface, you go through a few caves and doors. You fall down a bit of a long shaft, and it seems familiar somehow. You enter a door, find yourself in Old Turian, the area you killed Mother Brain in the first game. You keep going, and you take an elevator down to the starting zone from your first adventure in Samus's boots. You know the drill here. Go left, grab the morph ball. It's back in that same spot for some reason. And then, camera? You're being watched. You encounter a few more of those cameras down here in this area. And once you search enough, and you head back up through the old Turian base, suddenly it springs back to life. Space pirates, for the first time that you see them in all the games, infest these rooms. What first seemed like a hunt for just Ridley quickly turned into something much more. Better get to exploring. So, what has changed in terms of gameplay? A lot, actually. Samus controls probably the best she has ever up until this point. Good movement, good speed, there's a run button to move just a little faster and jump a little further. The jumps are a little floaty, but also have a good amount of weight to them. I know that seems a little counterintuitive, but if you've tried jumping in this game, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Controlling Samus is fantastic. Wall jumping, shine sparking, beam combos. You want to turn off certain upgrades? You can. Not sure why you would, but you can. And finally, beams actually stack. Now, this is the first game where beam weapons stack. You collect them all, and instead of swapping one out for the other, they all just build on top of each other. That's amazing. Things are more powerful and more unique to you as a player. You can change the controls however you want. More upgrades, more power. It's amazing. It's only a fraction of the gameplay tweaks. Samus can shoot in 8 directions, to include up and down. Jump and shoot, hold a charge beam, bomb jumping, X-ray scope for hidden passages and secret items, reserve tanks if you happen to run out of energy mid-fight. The enemies are well balanced. The areas you can traverse don't hold your hand, and you can explore them at your own pace. Following the breadcrumbs left by the Chozo and the space pirates, so good. Find all those bosses, defeat them, slowly piece everything back together, and uncover the story. Things might not be as they appear. Let's talk about the visuals for a bit, yeah? This game, while holding onto the feel of the prior two, is styled in such a way where it takes the color from the first game, which, awesome, and takes the big bold sprites from the second game, equally awesome, and combines them. So now you have big, bold, colorful sprites, which, awesome. That's the best thing they could have done. Add on top of that the power that the SNES brought with it back in the day, and you have one of, if not the best looking game of its time. It has a surprising amount of detail to it. Bosses change color as you weaken them. Some straight turn into bones after melting away in actual acid. Things fall off, things decay, places change. The intro alone showcases a wide variety of detail. Zoom in, zoom out, shifting backgrounds, rain? Along with the graphical improvements over the last 2 games, right? The sound only got better. No more bleeps or bloops from the Game Boy. And the 8-bit renditions of the Metroid themes got a hefty overhaul, to the point where the music is still being remixed to this day. When I said this game is a classic, I really meant it. The music is ambient. Every track makes you feel alone, and depending on the area, either curious or anxious or cautious. Probably a mix of all 3 at the same time, who knows? It strikes the proper tone at every turn. Boss music is energetic and it gets you ready to fight. Boss sounds, fun fact, are sampled from old Godzilla movies. That really has nothing to do with what we're talking about here, except for the fact that that's just an awesome random bit of knowledge that you are now cursed with. You're welcome. And I could go on and on and on, and I will eventually, but for everything good and great, there has to be something that's, well, not so great. So this is where I'm sure I might lose a few people. And I mean, I get it. All right, I understand. I just spent the last, well, let's call it 10 minutes here, maybe a little longer, talking this game up like you wouldn't believe. So what could possibly take this game down a notch? Well, simply put, the not so good stuff is, well, honestly, it's fairly minor. But it has enough impact on the game feel. Don't worry, I'll get into the crazy stuff that more than makes up for this later. But let's take it one step at a time, yeah? First thing, going back to Super Metroid now after having played more recent titles in the game series, so it's a little rough around the edges. It's a bit cumbersome, let's say. Looking at it from a 1994 perspective, yeah, no, absolutely, this game is fluid and controls great. But we're not stuck in 1994, at least I don't think so. And because of that, things have changed. Button layouts on controllers are much better now, and this game could benefit from a few extra button options. The run feature, while neat and helpful, is its own separate button that can be a bit difficult to utilize at times. Wall jumping, while excellent, is fairly finicky. It requires either pinpoint action or a ton of time spent to master it. Item cycling, not super great. You have to go through all the options just to get to the equipment that you actually want or need to use, and then you have to cancel it when you're done. Now, this wouldn't be a problem in the slightest, but I mean, I've accidentally fired off a few extra super missiles that I definitely didn't mean to do, and that's kind of on the game and also kind of on me. I should have recognized that, but it is still a problem. If this game had controller options like we have now, this wouldn't be a problem in the slightest. But it doesn't, and while you can go in and change the button layout to whatever you like, that only helps to ease the stress and not really get rid of it completely. Speaking of stress, the worst place in the game, in my opinion, is Meridia. I do not care for it. My God, I do not care for it. Super Metroid started this trend of having just a water area for seemingly no reason. It exists as a biome because why not? Every other area in this game is so good and so well crafted, and then here comes Meridia. Ugh. The theme of the area, while mostly chill, gets to be a bit much after a while. The sand pits that you can fall into, and in some cases you need to fall into, aren't telegraphed very well, by the way, when you need to fall into them, but if you accidentally fall into it, good luck getting out. It's the most frustrating thing in the world. Well, at least in this game. The fact that the jump ball is in Meridia for some reason? I mean, never mind, at this point you have the gravity suit, you have, hopefully, the space jump, and a few other things. Why would you need jump ball now? But it's here for some reason, so, you know, have fun hunting that down. This whole area just feels kind of tacked on in some respects, and due to that, it feels like it wasn't polished as much as the other areas. I mean, admittedly, right, these are my opinions, and this area could very well be your favorite place in the whole game, and I respect that. But it's not mine. Some of these gripes, I feel, are somewhat relatable, right? Especially if you're just a casual player. If you're a Super Metroid fanatic, and I know you exist out there, then these things probably don't matter much to you. In fact, this whole video might not matter much to you, especially this part where I'm griping. But for the casual people out there who like the series well enough, these are things to consider. And again, admittedly, these are just my opinions. And the most important thing is, I don't think these minor gripes take away from much at all, actually, from the main game as a whole. And that is simply because... Alright, so here's where things get a little crazy, and where I'm going to gush just a little bit on what makes this game damn near perfect and infinitely replayable. So all that stuff I said about it being a little rough, forget it. Push it aside, get rid of it, right? This game is rad. There are so many ways to get through this game. It is insane. Let's talk about sequence breaking. So for those of you who might not know what a sequence break is, this is where you, as a player, get into an area or get an item which you weren't really supposed to get to or have just yet. And Super Metroid is chock full of these things, of these sequence breaks, intentional or otherwise. You can get so much done so quickly that this game is a crazy thing to watch get speedrun. Speedrun? Watch a speedrun. Hell, I would say this game is what popularized that method of gameplay. It's gotten to a point where I myself play certain events out of order, and that's just become my standard way of beating the game. All right, here's a great example. You can just barely make this jump with a well-placed and timed wall jump and get into Kraid's lair way early and get all kinds of items and skills that you might not be able to get to unless you have the high jump boots, which you get later. Or here, in one of these early areas, you can do a technique called the mock ball and speed under these checkpoints to get super missiles early. Feel like getting to the wrecked ship but don't have a grapple beam? Do a shine spark across the water. Not enough room, you say? Nonsense. By starting your run off without holding the button, waiting just a few frames, and then pressing the run button, you now build up speed in way less space and zoom across with no problem. Low on health, but have a ton of missiles and power bombs? Do a crystal flash and heal up in no time. There are other beam combos as well. Jump in, test them out. You can also shine spark diagonally and get into some spots you might not think to reach for otherwise. There is so much stuff that can be done, it would take forever to list them all. This game has been broken 6 ways to Sunday. And if you feel like looking at it or learning even a little bit about it, check out Games Done Quick. Every year, they end the charity event with a Super Metroid run of some description, and it gets the most hype out of all the games that they run. So much so that the biggest incentive for the event is either to save the animals or save the frames. And again, I barely scratched the surface on this stuff. From secret boss kills to secret messages in the boss rooms and attack patterns and Crocomire. Oh my god, this game has so much to offer. Alright, so here we are, at the end of another Metroid Retrospective video. Man, what a ride. Only 3 games in at this point, and it went from cool, ambitious idea to a wild, portable adventure to this honest-to-God masterpiece. There are a few games out there in this world that hold this kind of acclaim, and this is definitely one of them. I promise that if you bring this up, if you bring up Metroidvania, the genre, at any point, and you ask what the greatest of all time is, this game will make at least the top 3, if not actually be the pinnacle on this list, without fail. So, where does this land us? Well, if you've played through the whole game, you will have found this room with statues for all the bosses. Once they're all dead and gone, the room drains, and you enter New Turian. Much like the original, this area is filled with Metroids, which is a little odd considering you just eradicated the whole species in the last title. But if you were paying attention, you would have seen the Metroids in the Meridia area. The space pirates have been attempting to clone the Metroids. All they needed was the baby from the intro, the one that is now missing from its containment capsule thanks to Ridley. You push deeper into New Turian. Eventually you find an area not unlike some of the environments from Brinstar. A hopper jumps out at you, and close behind is, oh my god, that's a big Metroid. You try to freeze it and dispatch it like the others, but it doesn't work. This one's immune to the ice beam. Run. That's all you can do. But Samus isn't fast enough. The Super Metroid attaches onto you. There's no way to get it off. Samus dies. Except no, she doesn't. At the last possible second, the Metroid lets go and gives off a familiar sound. It's the baby Metroid. Seemingly out of shame for killing its own mother, it flies away, leaving Samus on the verge of death. With nothing else to go off of, you push forward. You enter another familiar area. You've been here before. You blast through the barriers and you get to the glass case for Mother Brain. Just like the first time, you blast enough missiles into it to take down the tri-state area. The battle is over, but there's no escape timer. The music picks back up. Mother Brain has been upgraded. It's become a strange T-Rex-like monster. No problem. Just blast away. You notice that unlike before, Mother Brain isn't really changing color. In fact, it's charging something up. There's no time to dodge. Samus takes the full brunt of the attack. It hits hard. Samus down on her knees. Can't muster the strength to stand. Side tangent. It's impressive to see that at this point in the game, after being built up as the most powerful thing on this planet, at the very end of your journey, you get bested twice. Once by a baby, and the other by a creature you've already defeated once before. All the power that you had built up through this game, stripped away in the last 10 or so minutes. It makes you feel helpless on this one planet where you are all alone. Mother Brain charges up one last attack. It did so much damage the first time. Now it's just overkill. Samus, once again, faces her death, and with the blink of an eye, is saved by the baby Metroid. It swoops in at the last possible second to tank the shot and feed off of Mother Brain, draining the monster of its life. In an effort to make amends, it feeds Samus all the energy it just siphoned off of the Mother Brain, but it wasn't enough. The brain just won't stay down. It revives itself and starts to land hits on the baby as it shields and protects Samus. You notice the Metroid is changing color, just like all the other monsters you faced. It's dying and flies away just in the nick of time, leaving a fully powered up Samus to finish the fight. Only it comes back in and in a flash dies right above Samus. The screen goes black and little wisps of energy fall down. The music changes. You now have a righteous fury in you. The baby Metroid, the whole reason you came to this planet, gone in a flash of light. I'll let the rest of this play out in real time. Each shot hitting Mother Brain with such force it flings its head back in pain. Every shot landed a scream of anguish, to a point where Mother Brain won't even fire back. It's scared. And just like that, it's over. Mother Brain is finally defeated and dead. The evacuation order is made and you hightail it out of there. But just when you thought you were off scot-free, you're met with one final choice. Save the animals. Or escape. You save the animals, of course. You make it back to your ship and the planet explodes. Zebes is truly gone after that. All the space pirates, all the Chozo knowledge, all of it, gone. Mother Brain is well and truly dead. And with no Metroids left, the galaxy is at peace once again. Man, what a ride this game is. If you haven't played it, you owe it to yourself to give it a go, especially if you like this style of game. This is where the formula was all but perfected, and every game based on this has been refining that toolkit ever since. There are not any official remakes of this game, and normally it would be kind of hard to come across in the wild if you wanted to play on original hardware, but thankfully there are some options. You can play it on the Virtual Console or the SNES game library on Switch, the SNES Mini, and any 3DS that has Virtual Console access. And if none of those are available, you could always emulate it. There are not many games that I would give the must-play treatment to, but this is one of them, for sure. Hell, the video length alone should be proof enough of that. Grab a seat, get a snack, get a drink, and get lost on Zebes. Or at least watch a speedrun. Like, for real, that's awesome to see. At any rate, join me next time as we venture forward about a decade or so into the next installment of Metroid. A fusion of new and old ideas. Hey, if you made it through all of that video, you are a champion. I truly thank you. If you liked it, hit it with a thumbs up. Share it around. The more the merrier, right? Do me a favor and hit that sub button. And I'll see you on the next Metroid Retrospective.